So, before you departed to sunnier climates,
Yes.
we had a conversation about the program that I'd watched.
Okay.
And at the time, you hadn't watched it.
No.
And you hadn't watched it, Andy.
Correct.
And that program was
I don't know, something to do with age or young.
Adolescence.
Oh, yeah. Adolescence.
Oh, he's in one of his...
He
He sends these little words in.
I'm sorry
to catch
But
you
you've
up.
allowed it to fester because we should have started at 10 o'clock and it's now kind of 11:10. Not you, generally. 11:10. So now I've been sitting around ages and I'm
Just forgot what you're talking about.
I know what we're going to talk about, but we're just kind of, So anyway, go ahead.
So here it is. It's the podcast nobody asked for. Three guys in a kitchen, drinking coffee and having a chat.
Obviously, I watched the program.
Did you like it?
No.
You didn't like it? Okay.
I didn't like it because as I've now researched, it's a true reflection on what's going on in society.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who says they liked it, I'd go and sit in a dark corner.
liking it is probably not the right.
Exactly.
not
I
right
found
way.
it. I found it worrying. But also for me, a relief that my children aren't at that age.
Yeah.
You know, my children are, well, they're not children now, they're adults. They're 23 and 21.
Yeah.
But for parents with children 5, 6 onwards,
Moving on. Yeah.
my word, you have to re-look at what you're giving access.
Popular, hasn't it? I mean, the program itself has a phenomenal audiences all around the world.
Well, interesting you said that. This was discussed yesterday.
Was it?
My wife's school, because there's been a lot of press about local authorities were deciding to show it. And my wife's schools have decided not to show it.
Yeah.
And they've decided not to show it because of the messages that it's highlighted.
Yes.
But what they have agreed is to do something with the emojis that were highlighted in the program.
Yeah. Okay.
So that parents get an understanding of what these emojis relate to.
Yes.
So if they do see them on their children's phones, they can then put something in place to address it.
Interpret what they are. But it has been a phenomenal kind of... It reminds me of the old days when we used to watch TV, a program on TV. Everybody watched it at the same time.
Everybody was watching it. Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, like that. Well, whatever, those kind of things. So in a funny kind of way, Netflix has achieved that, but throughout the world.
Well,
it's amazing.
Well, it has. And you come on to when you were in Spain and the lady was talking about it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But come back to that point about all sat together. We didn't as a family.
No.
Mm-hmm.
You know, me and my wife sat and watched it.
Yeah.
And then when we watched it, we told our children about it and advise them, you know, have a look at it.
Yeah.
They're old enough now to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But
so no, although we didn't watch it all together around the world, it's the idea that it's a program that's created a stir and everybody's talking about it because we watched it around about the same time.
Yeah.
If you have a normal streaming kind of thing where you can watch something today and then you might watch it in a month's time, whatever, that that's different.
Yeah.
This has achieved what we used to achieve.
Yeah, I
thought for that reason it was an amazing kind of event.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is something that hasn't been achieved on television or in film for a long time. Christmas Day used to be what was on BBC. So it would be, your Queen's speech, and then you'd watch whatever the film was, and then you'd watch whatever the evening's entertainment was.
Only Fools and Horses.
And everybody would watch it. Whereas now that seems to have gone quite a few years now, where you no longer watch what everybody else is watching. And instead we're all streaming our own thing, on our phones, TikTok and whatever.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. That's probably what it's achieved.
Yeah.
Is to have something that everybody is doing all at the same time. And that's probably part of the reason why everybody is talking about it. Then obviously the other thing is the subject matter that is in there and how
Can I suggest something before we go into talking about the subject matter? One of the things that I'm conscious of is that this has created a stir and it's got people talking, which is amazing, right? But it's been covered on TV, on radio stations, on podcasts, and all. We don't want to do the same thing.
No.
So we don't want to delve into
the program,
not the program, and delve into the subject matter to the extent that it's what's happening out there. I think if we're going to, what I'd consider doing is maybe I'd like to talk about the method of the program and stuff. That would be quite interesting.
or the way they made it.
But I'd also like to keep the discussion about the program based on our own feelings about it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
What we think about it, our feelings about it. You in your situation with your children and the age that they are. You with Isabel in the way that we are, and me as an old person. Why? Where's this come from?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So rather than kind of talk about the way that everybody else is talking about it, I'd like to make it slightly different.
And about us and what we're thinking.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. Yeah.
But I really did. I've seen kind of one take programs before. I mean, Stephen Graham did one with Boiling Point. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was really quite interesting. Do you watch that?
Yeah.
And that was in a restaurant. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And a kitchen.
Yeah.
And talking about the technicalities of it, that within that environment, it seemed feasible to do. Great it was, but it was feasible but to do it in what they did in this program, which was to kind of move it around in different locations, but still with the same take, going from the house where they had the raid to do that upstairs, downstairs, into the garden, and then in the car to the police station. To do that was just amazing. And when you think about one take, you think about it being confined.
Yes.
You're right. But this was...
They took it to a level where you could move.
Only in the police station when they went from one room, right? But they followed a character out of that room into another room, and then that became the environment.
Yes.
So amazing.
It was incredible. And what I thought that did was make you be there. Yeah. Because there wasn't, when you're normally watching a documentary, a drama, you'll get a scene in a police station and then it'll cut away to the girl's family and it'll tell you what's going on there. And then it'll cut away to the solicitors and then it'll cut away to the detectives. But because this was all done all in one go, you were there, and you couldn't really, there wasn't an escape. You are drawn into it completely.
But one comment that somebody made, a friend, was that it was a bit slow. And I thought, but it's in real time. It's in real time. It's slow.
Yes.
Right. And it was mentioned also that whole tedious, slow process of taking every single fingerprint.
Yes.
One by one. In that room. Do you remember that scene?
Yes.
It was so slow, but you were there.
Yeah.
Weren't you?
Yeah.
But I think that's what Andy's point is. You immerse yourself in it.
Yeah.
You were the fourth person in the room.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got the impression when I was watching it made you think more about the stress,
the impact.
The pure adrenaline that's happening when you must be going through that, and they conveyed that, superbly. For like I said, all the different scenes had their own tension, their own emotion, but the message was still underlined. Or like there's a young boy, this kid that's committed an horrendous murder.
The reactions of the parents, the reactions of the dad finding this out in the police station was quite amazing, because in a normal kind of filming, you'd cut to it and cut away from it.
Correct, yeah.
And it would be intense kind of brief moment of his kind of pain and the agony that he's gone through finding this out, right?
Yeah.
But to watch it in real time, developing that kind of emotion that came out of it was just so powerful, really. And I think, for
me and you, Ash, it's a case of we survived.
Yeah.
We escaped it.
Yes.
But directing it to Andy,
Yeah.
he's living it.
Yes.
Because his daughter's in education.
Yes.
She's surrounded by this technology.
Yeah.
That is slowly eroding society.
Right.
And you just listen to some of the people in society now saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. Phones have got a lot to answer for.
Incredible amount, yeah.
Right?
I think what I said to my dad, because my dad watched Adolescence before I did, interestingly enough, because I'm not really one to watch stuff that's trending or whatever. And we discussed the difference between him so my dad's now, he'll be 72 this year. And so the difference between him, your generation, where we were discussing how Isabel will, she doesn't, I don't see a great deal of Isabel. I'm a taxi, I'm a bank, we don't spend a lot of time together. And the fact is that when you're 14, you don't, do you? When you're 14, you might have your meal with your parents and then you go up to your room. Because I did, my dad did. When my dad went up to his room, he listened to his record collection. When I went up to my room, it was on the very edge of the internet sort of coming into existence. It wasn't quite there. We had MSN Messenger where we could talk to our friends, but it was very slow. You couldn't really so I'd go into my bedroom and play computer games.
Yeah.
When Isabel goes into her bedroom, the whole world is in that room. That's the big difference between this current generation that are in their teenage years, is that it's no longer going away and putting something on the telly. People you like, people you don't like, people who influence you, people who you influence. The whole thing is right there on a little block in your hand. And I think it means that this generation now, in my mind, can't escape what is happening. I think things have always happened. Generationally, there's always been, teenagers have always had their issues. And I don't think that we can talk about, knife crime this, or drugs, or stealing, or whatever it is that we want to talk about. Teenagers have always had those issues. The difference that we've got now is that they have no way at all of escaping those issues, because friends are there. They're not knocking on their door. They are there in the palm of their hand.
Yeah, I think
at every moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think where this program highlighted to me, which comes back to what you were saying about America and politeness and everything, is the respect. Mm-hmm. Now, I was born in 1969. I was never in the house. If my mum and dad were, sitting on this podcast, they'd say, we never saw Stuart.
Yeah.
He was always out with his mates, playing football, riding his bike, playing hide and seek, playing, prisoner of war, where we'd make our own enjoyment. You're right. There was drugs going on. There was murders going on. But I wasn't exposed to it because there was 3 TV channels.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There was a newspaper. Or newspapers. That was it.
Mm-hmm. And you only talk to the people that you talk to.
Yeah, you could escape. That for me is what I'm trying to get at with how this generation is different. It's just exactly what you said. You were out with your mates.
Yeah.
Kids now are at home with people who are not their friends, who could be horrible to them, and they've got no way of escaping it.
Yeah.
You could choose your friends.
Yeah.
I could choose my friends.
Yeah.
I don't think Isabel, in the same way, I know she does choose her friends. She's got her friend group that she associates with.
Yeah.
But it's different in the sense that she cannot escape that negativity. Whereas before, our generation, your generation, we could take ourselves out of a situation. This generation don't have the ability to be able to take themselves out of it.
But it's also about influence. So influence is, early on, it's kind of looking at your own family and what role models you've got in the family. Mm-hmm. If I was to look at my situation, I would, I never set myself up to be a role model. You don't sit your kids down and say, this is how you behave. This is how you should talk to people, da, da, da. You don't do that. You hope, if you are really thinking about it, you hope that they are witnessing you and the way that you treat your wife, you treat your kids and other people, how you talk to people, those kind of things are the things that hopefully they pick up on and emulate, and that's the way it's done. We no longer have that influence on our kids because we see them for a fraction of the time compared to the time they spent at school with their friends online, So they're going to get more influence from those kind of things than they will ever get from us.
Correct.
And we have no control over that.
We don't.
And nobody has control over that.
No, certainly doesn't.
So I disagree with that. I disagree with that quite firmly. My children never had a TV in their room, never had a mobile phone until they were exposed to being away from me or their mum.
Mm-hmm.
So mobile phones, my children never had their mobile phones till they were 13 or 14. And I made sure they weren't given access to things I thought were inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
They also had boundaries. They also had discipline. And I was often pulled up by other adults, other parents to say, you're a bit firm with my son, for example. And sometimes I was. But when people come to you and says, what a lovely young man. Now, because he's polite, he's courteous, he's respectful, I did a great job. My wife did a great job. Is he perfect? No.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at that program and the school scene, I was horrified.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, children talking to a teacher, I was no saint at school, but I would not have spoken to the teacher.
And I agree.
Like in that program. It made me feel, it made me feel really uncomfortable and scared.
Yeah, and I agree. And obviously what my original intention to do before we recorded today was to either bring Isabel in to have this chat or to talk to her about what this is like, what this is really like, for a 14-year-old girl, 14-year-old boy, whatever, how accurate was that portrayal.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, for reasons that, she was in a very different place when we did sit down and speak on Thursday, which, as I said to you, and I think, to be fair, I may very well include, if I can in some way, some of the conversation that me and Isabel had, because she did say that, yes, it is a very accurate portrayal. The school scene is very much that is how school is. And I think that's
horrific.
Incredibly scary. Yeah. I mean, the police, Isabel has told me that the police have been at her school on several occasions for, I think apparently they went there once because a student had assaulted a teacher. They then went there another time because a teacher had assaulted a student. Because, and I'm not saying it's okay that teachers might assault young people in a school, but if you looked at how that school situation is, and as a human being, as a teacher, probably every chance that you would end up throttling one of these kids, because, the attitude, that your point about respect, there doesn't appear to be any respect. I've seen videos from Isabel's school of being filmed inside the school where it's a lad literally just kicking doors off of cupboards. And that's happening within the school environment. And I don't know how a school are ever going to get a handle on just how bad this situation is.
So just pull that back to one topic of mobile phones. I have a real big issue with children having a mobile phone in school. I've got no problems with a parent giving a child the use of a phone while they're walking to school or coming back from school. I totally understand that, right? And society has changed, by the way, because when I was going to school, you'd see loads of kids walking to school, cycling to school. Most people now drop their kids off at school.
It does appear to be, more.
So the society has changed.
Yeah.
But what's your view on mobile phones?
In schools?
In school.
If I'm completely honest, so mobile phones came out when I was 15. I had my first mobile phone. I never took it to school, but then I never had any reason to take it to school because it was just a phone. There wasn't any games, there wasn't any apps, there wasn't any things that I could post on social media. It was just a phone. And whilst I'm in school, who's going to phone me other than other people who are already in school? So it was mobiles were there, but they weren't a part of it. Now Isabel's in secondary school and it's not even considered. It's just accepted. Mobile phones are there in the classroom, and that is just how it is.
Yeah, but I think the boat sailed a little bit.
Yeah.
People already recognise that it's a problem, and there are all sorts of ways that they try to kind of address that. So I know it is, but isn't it simple to address? Well, yes. To ban them or to stop them coming in with the phones? What do you do?
So if I was a headmaster of a school,
You'd just ban phones.
I'd make a policy that children do not have phones switched on in school.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah. If you are found to have a phone switched on, right, then there is consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
the problem is, sorry, Andrew, the problem is the word consequences, right, isn't accepted in society.
Yeah.
We're becoming scared of putting rules and regulations because people don't want to be controlled. But I'm sorry, that's our future.
Yeah. No, like I said, I think it's accepted that it's a problem, and they're looking. There are all sorts of ways that they're trying to address it. So I don't think it's unnoticed. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But I think the thing about, when we were at school 55, 60 years ago, I mean, behaviour, in the lessons wasn't that problematic. In the registration parts of it, when we used to be in registration, they used to have a lot, but it wasn't anything like it is now. And I think there's a lot of things about, they talk about in the program a lot about role models and why young boys don't know how to behave, well, they referenced Andrew Tate, didn't they, who's in the news consistently, and they mentioned that in the program as being a role model. Yeah. And the idea that young boys are expected to be, strong, good looking, buffed up or whatever you call it and stuff like that. But then on the opposite side, they're expected to be very, sensitive.
Yeah.
And, so it's kind of this not knowing where
you are. And I think when I watched the third episode, which was the one with the psychiatrist,
brilliant,
which was just absolutely phenomenal, and it got to the very end of the scene, and I watched that one with my dad, and it got to the very end of the episode, and she was leaving. She said that time's up, that's our sessions are over, and obviously he loses all control and he flips out. And you can see the acting was incredible, but you can see the actor sort of building up this emotion as he's trying to obviously not let her go. And one of the lines, and I predicted it, before he said it, I was just like, he wants to know
what she thinks of him.
And I said it out loud, and my dad was like, that's exactly what he says. And he does, because you can see that we talk about young boys, and a lot of the discussion that's been brought up from this conversation is about incel culture and social media and misogyny and knife crime. But I thought that was something that was really important. That it showed the fact that him and young men and young boys just want to know if they're good enough. They want to be accepted.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite a startling,
both from a young boy's perspective and what she thought of him, but from a male and female perspective.
Yeah.
And how, because he's probably been told he's no good at this and he's ugly, because he mentioned it. Yeah. He wants to know that he is accepted.
Yeah.
And so,
but Ash, that's no different to when we were at
school.
No,
absolutely not.
I think that's the bit that does carry.
There was always Mr. Popular and Mrs. Popular.
Yes.
There was always the group of good boys and the group of good girls.
Yeah.
You'd always have the best footballers play together on the field at lunchtime, and they wouldn't invite the lads who couldn't play football.
Correct.
They were like the cool kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that's carried through.
Then you had the SWATs.
Yeah.
The SWAT kids that were, and I did in my school.
Yeah, all generations.
And I just think that today, society is all about putting people in silos, in pockets, right? Whereas when I was at school, that was just how the world evolved. We didn't try and look at it any more complicated.
Yeah, and that's the difference, because I think when we were kids, if you like, the roles were defined.
Yeah.
I mean, I would disagree with them now, but they were defined, and it made it a lot more comfortable in the way that we behave.
Yeah.
Understanding what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and the girls and so on were the same. But I think now that's kind of changed to a point where, girls have been given the opportunity to become more, self-sufficient, more confident.
Yes, absolutely.
More able to, to be better, education-wise and all that kind of stuff. And in a kind of funny way, the whole idea of boys and young boys, that whole kind of situation's changed, right? They don't know how to behave or how to do whatever. And because they don't know, influences outside of their immediate kind of grouping is being online. They're being influenced by misogynists and people like that because they have no other way of trying to understand how best to behave, and that's causing a real problem for them.
So that goes back to what you originally started talking about, role models, and something that Gareth Southgate said a few weeks ago, that men don't have positive role models. And do you think that's...
Do you think teachers can be role models?
Absolutely.
Okay. Male teachers?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one stat that I was horrified about.
I saw this, yeah.
Right? The recruitment in teachers, 25,000 recruited teachers, only 500 of those were men. That is one that's, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
One reason.
Yeah.
The other reason is, why are men not considering going into teaching? What is it about teaching that they don't want to get into? Is it because they don't think that it's a job for a man? Right? Do they think that they should be aspiring to greater things? And is it also combined with that whole kind of, I know from my own situation, from Anne's situation, who used to be a teacher, who used to be kind of secretary of the NUT and stuff. And she would say over the years, the whole kind of status of teachers has declined, has been whittled away at for all sorts of reasons, right? Whether it's through people talking about, they get so many holidays, or they're doing that. That whole job has taken a knock over decades to the point where the status of teachers isn't what it used to be.
I think it'd be really good to see if we can get a teacher willing to come and talk about what their job entails.
Easy.
Female or male.
Yeah.
Because from what I've witnessed, and my wife obviously works in a school now, and you're right, the percentage is more females than males. But when you relate it back to adolescence and the classroom scene, why would you want to put yourself in that situation?
Yeah. I was going to say that I know what Ash has said is true, that, do men want to achieve more than being a teacher? Has teaching been, devalued?
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't want to be a teacher, because I think I'd just frankly be petrified of what I'd be going into work to deal with every day.
So I've actually said to Lisa, I would love to be a teacher for a short period of time. And the reason I think I could communicate with children is because I've been a parent. I'm not saying the best parent in the world, but I've been a parent. I've also coached football for many years with children from a vast background. So you have to be able to wear a multitude of hats, but you have to be consistent. What children want is consistency.
Yeah.
They want uniformed approach to parenting. No favoritism, everybody treated the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in schools, the biggest problem, and this is contentious, but it's the biggest problem, is parents. Okay? When I went to school, my mum and dad supported the school 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, if I was in trouble, my parents wouldn't go up to the school to defend me.
Yeah. Whether they agreed or not,
they would go to the school and understand what the problem was.
Yeah.
The fact that that's a little Stuart, he's as good as my mum and dad knew I wasn't as good as. They knew I was a little at times. Yeah.
Yeah.
And parents today want to be children's best friend, right? And as a parent with my kids, I've told them time and time again, you're not going to like me at times. And sometimes you might go to bed hating me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wishing I wasn't your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for that, but I've got to do what's right for you. And that means sometimes you're going to hear that word, no. And I think parents are scared of saying no to children. They get the best of this. They get the latest of that. They do what they want.
I will fully hold my hands up and say that I am guilty of that. And I always have been guilty of that in terms of when I've been with Isabel. There's been times when I probably, I'll hold my hands up. I probably should have disciplined her, or I probably should have said no.
And that doesn't.
But I didn't.
But that doesn't mean physical discipline.
No.
Okay. What it means to me is do your best, and no matter how the end result is, I'll always back you 100%.
Yeah.
Right? I've got this simple rule, and it still happens today, which I'm quite embarrassed about. I brought my children up to say never tell lies.
Mm-hmm.
No matter if you're in the wrong, always tell the truth. You may still get told off, right? But you won't get punished if you are found to be lying.
Yeah.
Right? And I start the instances now with my children at 23 and 21. Simple things, really simple things. I said to my son when I went to London, the night before I was going to London, I need to have a shave, right? Went to get my shaving foam, it all gone, right? Now, in my house, there's 4 adults, but I'm being told there's a 5th person in the house. I haven't met him or her yet.
Okay.
But when things go missing or things get used, the other 3 people that I speak to, I can visualise with, all say it's not them.
So it's, yeah.
So it's almost the 5th person. And I'd love to grab hold of them and scrape them by the neck.
Because they're the ones who keep causing...
Because they're the ones who keep picking on my shaving foam and stuff like that.
But what happened to the shaving foam? Did they use it to make cappuccino?
Well, cappuccinos or his Rice Krispies or his cornflakes, whatever. But the fact of the matter was, right, he spoke to my wife to say, I think I have used it. But why didn't you just tell your dad? Because my dad would tell me off. No, your dad wouldn't tell you off if you said, yes, Dad, I did use it. He'd probably say, well, why didn't you tell me it's all gone so we could get some more?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you've said you haven't used it, when he knows one of us had used it.
Yeah.
You know, it's that boundaries in that. And I think that's the wide society is breaking down. And that program highlighted so many ways of this society.
Well, I think Stephen Graham was being interviewed and he's used the phrase about it takes a village to raise a child, because this isn't social media. It's all of it. It's parenting. It's teaching.
Yeah.
It's young people.
The economy.
Yeah. It's everything. Parenting. You know, I mean, one of the reasons why I found it difficult, and I don't know, you know, this was just my personal situation with Isabel growing up, but one of the things that I found difficult in terms of disciplining Isabel was separated parenting.
Yes.
And the fact that if I did something and told Isabel no, then it would be extreme to say that it was parent alienation. It would be extreme to use the phrase that her mum would alienate, because I don't think there was any intention. But because she disliked me so much, whatever decision I made, I would be criticised for, and I would get Isabel then coming back to me and going, oh, well, Mum said you shouldn't have told me off for doing that. And so because you end up in this unintentional competition then, because you still want to please your child and you still want to spend time with her, and you want to love them and you want them to love you. So you make allowances because you don't want them going back to the other parent and saying, oh, well, Dad told me off for this. And then it being built into something that it's not.
Yeah, interesting. Ash, did you ever speak to your parents, your dad, for example, about tips on being a dad? When you found that Ant was expecting a first?
No, of course not.
Right.
No, of course not. Okay. I think everybody's parenting skills or parenting's approach is completely different. Some people have, your kind of view of the way to deal with it. Mine's probably a bit more liberal.
Yeah.
But we've ended up with kids that are okay, aren't they?
Yeah. No, exactly. But just going back to Andy's example, the reason I asked you that question, was because I never had a really loving relationship with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a firm matriarch of the family because he never knew his dad. Patriarch. My mum was a matriarch.
Yeah.
But my dad only really told me one thing when I was getting married, is make sure that you and Lisa work as a pair, as a couple.
Yeah.
Because the children will try and break you.
Yeah.
Right. And your example typifies exactly that. My son would come to me and say, Dad, can I have that? And I'd go, no. He'd then go to his mum and say, Mum, can she have that? Lisa would always go, what did your dad say?
Yeah.
So we never had that very, very, I can't even remember when the children ever won.
Yeah.
Because me and Lisa had already had that unwritten rule that if the children came to her or they came to me, I would say, what did your mum say?
Yeah.
Or go and see what your mum says.
Yes.
Whatever your mum says, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Right? Because I knew what Lisa would say.
Yeah. And you bang on. And I was really lucky when I was growing up. So my mum and dad split up when I was 14, and they remained from that day to now the very best of friends. So there was nothing that I could get away with. I couldn't go to my dad and play my mum off because they would speak to each other constantly.
Yeah.
And obviously, it was frustrating at the time because as a kid, you want to play your parents off against each other so that you can get what you want. But I'm so grateful that my mum and dad didn't allow that to happen. They were a team when they were together. When they split up, there was no opportunity for me to use one, play one off against the other because they remained, like you say, they remained doing it together as a team.
Yeah.
But I think.
Okay, so I think I'm just thinking about how we develop this, if we're going to develop it anymore, and where we're going to kind of wind it into, really, because going on and on isn't the best thing, really. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about, if we just go back to the program a little bit and things like that, and think about, what it portrayed in terms of problems. So there's all sorts of problems about parenting, about schools, about male versus female, how boys behave and how they should behave and how they are expected to behave and all of those kind of things. And there were kind of certain ideas of solutions to try, because it is a problem. It's a big issue. And there are lots of kind of suggestions and ideas. So the role model was one thing. And how do you create a good role model? And you'll talk about the fact that it's the mother and father kind of role model, if you like, or the combination of their two influences that, get this better outcome. So there's that kind of thing. There's the issue about online stuff, everything, the influence that you get from online because nobody else is talking about it, but you're getting it all online. And that has negative effect in a lot of ways. People also talk about young men, the whole thing about taking their own lives and the impact that has because they don't open up and, that kind of thing. That's a big issue, right? Mm-hmm. So, somebody also suggested things like, well, there are places which recreate the whole thing about youth clubs or, community kind of based, places that young adults can go to where they can open up and start talking, which they might not get in other places. Yeah. That makes a big difference. So there's those kind of things that can help and so on. But, I don't know where do you want to go really with the conversation from here?
I mean, I think we've probably done it enough justice that we can, we've covered as much as our knowledge and our experience is probably going to actually allow.
Yeah.
I think Stu's right. I think if there was other people that we could talk to.
Yeah.
Teachers. I've got a friend of mine who worked in the youth service for 30 odd years. And I've asked him, would he be interested in having a chat? Because from the youth club, youth service side of things, I used to work in the youth service in part-time before Isabel was born. And it was a great opportunity for young people in that age bracket to be somewhere and communicate with adults, and I probably was a bit of a role model for a period of time. And I think the youth service ended up just sort of being disbanded, sort of stripped apart for money saving reasons, because the public don't see what a youth service does. It's just a building down the road kids go to, they're not actually seeing the result of it until it's taken away. And then you've got that loss that they're not being engaged with further down the line. That's when the results are coming out. I think the problem with bringing the youth service back in is we've now lost a generation of workers.
People who could have done the job.
I got into it because a friend of mine did it, and he got into it because a friend of his did it, and they all taught each other and taught me. Then it all went, see, where do you start from now? You've got to start all the way from the very beginning with nobody that is actually experienced or able to do it. I think it's a long, hard challenge to get to that point now.
Yeah. Any final comments on this from you, Stewie?
No, I think it is a big problem, and it's something that we've all got to play our part in. And unfortunately, when you become a parent, you need to understand that you carry the biggest burden. And if you don't understand that, then I suggest you go and talk to somebody or learn from people that have done it. Because there's no book that you can buy about the perfect parent. You learn on the job. But you've got to remember one thing, that little child that you brought into the world, to them, you are the universe. And how you conduct, and you said earlier on in this podcast, how you conduct yourself is mirrored by that child looking through their eyes. And all I ask parents is to encourage them to ask their children, how are you?
So here it is. It's the podcast nobody asked for. 3 guys in a kitchen, drinking coffee and having a chat.